On the night of the 22nd of November, 1987, for about 90 seconds, someone took control of the television in millions of homes in Chicago. They were never caught. They were never identified. And to this day, no one knows for certain who they were or what they wanted. It began during the evening news on a major Chicago station. A sports reporter was reading the highlights of a game. And then, without warning, the screen went black. For a few seconds, there was nothing. And then, an image cut in. A figure stood against a sheet of wavering corrugated metal. They wore a mask. A plastic, grinning mask of Max Headroom. A strange computer-generated television character of the 1980s. All sharp angles and frozen smile. The figure swayed and jerked side to side. There was no voice. Only a low, electronic buzz. For about 25 seconds, this masked figure rocked silently in front of millions of confused viewers. And then it vanished. The news returned. The anchors, back in the studio, laughed nervously. "Well," one of them said, "if you're wondering what happened, so am I." What they did not yet understand was what this actually was. Someone had not hacked a computer. Someone had overpowered the station's broadcast signal itself. They had pointed their own transmitter at the link between the studio and its antenna, and, for a moment, shouted louder than an entire television network. It takes serious equipment to do that, and serious knowledge. This was not a child with a remote control. This was someone who understood exactly how television was broadcast and had built the means to hijack it. The station's engineers scrambled to change frequencies and forced the intruder off the air. They thought it was over. It was not. Because 2 hours later, it happened again. And this time, it was so much worse. That night, a second Chicago station was airing an episode of the British science fiction show, Doctor Who. And in the middle of it, the picture tore apart, and the masked figure returned. This time, there was sound. The voice was distorted, warped, pitched into something barely human. The figure ranted and laughed, in fragments that made almost no sense. It mocked a well-known broadcaster by name. It held up a can of Pepsi, a twisted joke, because the real Max Headroom character was famously the face of a rival brand. It hummed. It moaned. It said things that, even now, no one has fully been able to explain. And then the scene became genuinely disturbing. The figure turned around, bent over, exposed itself, and was struck on its bare skin with a fly swatter by a second person, hidden off camera, wearing a maid's outfit. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was gone. The screen snapped back to Doctor Who, as if nothing had happened. The whole second intrusion lasted about 90 seconds. The reaction was immediate and serious. Hijacking a broadcast signal is a federal crime. The authorities launched a real investigation. They studied the footage frame by frame. They analysed the background, the metal sheet, the voice, the props. They knew, roughly, the kind of equipment that would have been needed, and the level of skill. And they found nothing. No one was ever arrested. No one ever came forward. There was no ransom, no political message, no claim of responsibility. Whoever did this wanted, it seems, nothing at all, except, perhaps, to prove that they could. To step inside the most controlled medium of their time, wave at the entire city, and then disappear without a trace. Decades have passed. The technology that made it possible is long obsolete. The people involved would be much older now, if they are still alive. And in all that time, despite the footage being studied by countless people online, no one has ever been definitively identified. The Max Headroom incident remains one of the only times in history that someone seized control of the airwaves of a major city and got away with it completely. And now, imagine sitting in your living room that night. The news, or your favorite show, playing as it always does. The one window into the world that you trust to be controlled, scheduled, safe. And then it tears open, and a grinning, swaying figure in a mask is looking back at you, from inside your own television, laughing in a voice that isn't quite human. You don't know who they are. You don't know how they got in. And 90 seconds later, they're gone, and the show resumes, as if nothing ever happened. But somewhere out there, in a city of millions, someone took off a mask that night and simply walked back into the crowd. And they are still there,